Alright everyone, so today I wanted to share with you guys some important info about this absolute beast of a rare champion, and I consider this guy to be a bit of a hidden gem as well. There are people who know how good he can be, but I don't think enough people know. This guy has got some serious potential, and let's get right to it, starting off here with a campaign run so you guys can see how quickly and how efficiently he can farm. And important to note as well is that I'm actually not using my best gear. I just threw together some gear on him in about 5 to 10 minutes before recording this video. So let's go to a brutal 12-3 run with, of course, some food, and let's just see how quickly he can actually farm. And the crazy thing about this guy is his attack animation is super fast as well. So, you know, we're looking at a 7-second run there on the actual timer. Really crazy. Now, of course, the champion that I am talking about is going to be Felhound, and I wanted to share with you guys his gear, his stats, kind of how you want to build this guy, because he's really unique. This guy is not to be built the same way that you build a lot of other champions, because his first skill here is actually crazy. It scales both off of defense and attack, and it's also important to note that the multipliers for the skill are a combination of 1.7 times for defense and 1.8 times for attack. So it's a combination of both, and it's really important to understand that, because that is going to really change the way that you approach gearing this guy out, especially if you want to see the kind of stuff that you're really able to do with him, like clear the campaign really quickly, and of course, you know, use this guy as a support for the reflect damage for Fire Knights. But let's get into a little bit more of the general information behind this actual champion here. Felhound, of course, is going to be a Void rare, and when you look at his skill kit, his skill 1 here is an AoE, which is what gives him that potential to be a strong campaign farmer. So attacks all enemies, has a 25% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns, and of course it's based off of that combination of defense and attack. Then you've got his second skill right here, places a 7.5% continuous heal buff and a 15% reflect damage buff on all allies for 2 turns. Now, the important thing about this skill, obviously this is going to be what is good to have him as a support for Fire Knights, but it's really important to skill book this, because it's actually going to start off at a 4-turn cooldown, and you want to be able to get it down to that 2-turn cooldown. And the great thing is, it lines up, the duration of the buff lines up with the actual cooldown. So if you have the rest of your champions in your team and their speed is kind of coordinated and tuned with your Felhounds, then you basically should always have this buff up. In fact, if your other champions have a slower speed than your Felhounds, then you're 100% always going to have it up. But it's pretty consistent, and what you're going to be able to see from this, and just so I can show you guys as an example, I'm not going to do an entire run through of Fire Knights. I actually just have a little clip here so you guys can see that the reflect damage is awesome, because as soon as he actually activates his shield, he's going to attack all of your champions. He does an AoE, and if you have a reflect damage active, it's actually going to break off a good chunk of that shield right away, so it's a lot easier to get through. So you'll see here, he's going to put up his shield, and right off the bat, we had a couple of stacks of that shield go off. And obviously, you want to make sure to coordinate this and you know, really work on the speed and the gear of your champions, so that hopefully you can always have that reflect damage active. So, you know, instead of only getting 3 stacks off like I was in this actual clip, you can actually consistently get all 5 stacks off. Really makes handling the Fire Knight a lot easier. So that's what that skill is going to be for. Then moving on to his next skill here, places a block damage buff on an ally for 1 turn. Get that down to a 3-turn cooldown. Not really the thing about him that makes him super unique here. He's got this aura as well, increases ally defense and faction crips by 19%. It's really this first skill right here, which is what makes him shine as a campaign farmer, and his second skill right here, which is what makes him shine as a fantastic support for the Fire Knights castle. Now let's talk a little bit about gear, because this is really important. And of course, if you want to use this guy as a campaign farmer, I like to say now there are really 2 approaches that you can take. And it's very difficult for a campaign farmer, unless you are already kind of like in the mid to late game, to really be able to get the gear and the stats to consistently one-shot every single champion every single wave. It's possible, of course. There are plenty of people that can do it, and if you guys are already in the mid to late game, you might not have any kind of problem with that kind of gear. But another way to do it so that you don't necessarily have to have the ridiculous amount of damage to one-shot everything is to try to get your speed above 200 or so. And the reason why I say that is because that is going to be the speed at which your champion is going to have 2 actions before the enemies can act even once. So that way, you actually don't have to worry as much about getting a ton of attack and defense on your gear. And now, because you have the speed to be able to act twice, as long as you are now 2-shotting all of your enemies, because this guy's attack animation is so fast as well. You can see, you might not even been able to tell, but I was actually taking 2 actions there on a couple of those turns. So I don't need to go absolutely crazy, you know, perfecting my DPS, as long as I have the speed in order to take those 2 actions. So whichever path that you actually decide to take is totally fine, depending on the gear that you have available. But if you are looking for that speed, you're going to need a number of around 200. I think the exact number is something like 191, but I like to stay above 200 just to be on the safe side. Now, in terms of actual stats here, remember, the unique thing about this champion is the combination of both defense and attack. And just so you can see the multipliers one more time right there, they're 1.7 times defense, 1.8 times attack, which means you really do want to try to get a decent balance of both defense and attack. If you wanted to lean a little bit more with one than the other, you want to lean a bit more towards defense, because defense, of course, is also going to give you that additional survivability, and you're going to take less damage. So not only are you ramping up the DPS of his skill 1, but you are also going to be increasing his actual defenses as well. But getting a decent combination of both is pretty important for this guy right here. So that's one thing that you're going to want to aim for. Another thing, of course, is that speed, and what I did, I always like to do this, especially on campaign farming champions, is definitely make sure that you are crit capped and getting that, you know, decent crit chance, crit damage as well. So, you know, if you don't have insane gear, you can always just go with crit rate gloves. You know, I'm not even using crazy crit damage gloves. Like I said, this guy was not in my best gear at all. You know, it's decent, but it's definitely not the best gear that I have available to me. So have that 100% crit rate, you know, as much crit damage as you can, and of course a very healthy balance of attack and defense, and then you can kind of decide on, you know, if you want to try to go for extreme damage and not really worry about speed, or if you want to go for higher speed and then kind of balance out your damage to be able to 2-shot stuff instead of 1-shot. Shouldn't really have too big of an impact on your clear time, because of course you guys saw the run that I did still only took 7 seconds, even though I was actually 2-shotting some of those waves instead of 1-shotting them. So I also think the 200 plus speed does help for his reflect damage skill here as well, to make sure that you can always have 100% uptime on that. So now, in terms of the jewelry here, pretty simple. It actually made gearing this guy out a lot easier, because, you know, I didn't have to worry about having, like, you know, a defense ring with defense stats. I was able to get a defense ring that actually had some solid attack stats here, because he uses a combination of both of them. Crit damage for the amulet, and honestly, accuracy, not really that important for this guy. He does have 1 debuff on his skill 1 here, which is the decreased speed, but it's the weak version of it, and this is really not the strong point of this champion. It's all he has, 4 debuffs, so I am 100% okay with kind of just neglecting that, not really worrying too much about accuracy, and rather just building up more attack and defense instead. I think that's probably going to be the better option to go for this guy. So I have a crit damage amulet, of course, and that's why I decided to just go with a regular old defense amulet instead, defense banner, instead of an accuracy one with just some additional defense and speed. So that's kind of the overall plan that you want to go with this champion. And of course, now the masteries are pretty, you know, pretty simple, not super particular for this guy. There's not really like super important masteries that you need to get. The only thing that I really wanted to go for was this one here, because I am actually using a lot of speed gear on this guy, so that'll give me an additional amount of speed. I know that there are a lot of people who like to go the defensive tree on this champion as well, but to be honest, I've messed around a little bit with the defense tree, and I can almost never really find it to be worth it, especially for a campaign farmer and somebody that I'm going to be using for Fire Knights. I still think going support is going to be better here. But one really big key noteworthy difference between this champion's masteries and a lot of my other ones is this guy is campaign farmer. So, you know, things like getting that additional damage on the first hit, normally I would not take this mastery, because when you're doing things like dungeons, you're obviously going to take a lot of turns. So just the first turn is not really that important. But when it comes to campaign farming, getting that additional damage on the first hit, you know, you're obviously going to be clearing everything in 1 or 2 shots anyway. So, you know, this mastery becomes a lot more worth it. Anything that really benefits from stuff dying as well, if you're going to be farming with food and your food is going to be dying consistently, you can rack up a bit of additional speed right there. I know, like this one here as well, gives you additional speed, additional damage for dead allies, of course. And I still decided to go with War Master. I'll have to do a little bit of testing. I know that actually even going for Flawless Execution on this guy, like if you're not going to use him for the clan boss at all, you're not going to use him for any of those dungeons, not a bad choice, honestly. I'll have to do a little bit of testing and see here, kind of comparing War Master to Flawless Execution. But everything else is pretty standard. You know, you've got the crit rate, the crit damage, additional damage with full HP, which he should be because he's always going to be getting that first action in the campaign. And I just decided to go with HP because, again, accuracy is just not really that big of a priority, given the fact that his only debuff is that weak speed, and it's just not really what makes this guy super great. So, yeah, masteries are pretty self-explanatory here. Extend the duration of buff is actually kind of one of the more important ones for the reflect damage, but yeah, you know, that's the masteries right there. And I think that's pretty much everything that you guys really want to know about this guy. Absolutely worth skill booking. He is a void rare as well, which makes it even more worth skill booking because he's probably going to be more difficult to get duplicate copies of this guy in the future. But absolutely a champion worth 6-starring, worth gearing out, working on for not just a campaign farmer, but also for the Fire Knight's Castle. Really, really great guy, and I definitely think he is considered to be a bit of a hidden gem out there. You hear a lot about Bellower, but you don't really hear as much about Fellhound. So that's going to be it for the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed, and if you did and you want more videos like this in the future, consider subscribing to the channel. Feel free to leave a quick like as well. It means more than you can imagine, so thank you very much to all of you guys who do that. And more Raid Shadow Legends videos, guides, tutorials, all that fun stuff should be popping up on the screen right about now. Feel free to check them out, but if not, until next time, take care everyone, and this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.